Dopamine swipe. Dopamine swipe. Follow us like.
Welcome to the 817 podcast. Today we have an awesome interview and truly probably one of my favorite episodes. I was super excited to share this with you guys after we recorded it. Jimmy and I spoke with Mike Brennan at near Southside, and we're really excited to have him on the show this week. But before we get into it, we do want to acknowledge the car wreck that happened on the icy roads of I-35 on Thursday, and just acknowledge how hard that has to be for so many people we know. Our hearts go out to the families who have dealt with losing a lost one or someone in the hospital. These are definitely tough times for the city. And I know there's going to be a lot more updates, and me and Jimmy will look forward to doing what we do every week, and that's read the local news and digest it and just update different takes. I do know that the chairman of the Texas House Transportation Committee is calling for an investigation into Thursday's deadly pileup. And so, and there's a lot of things being discussed about what was being treated, how was the toll road being handled. And I know we'll do more around that and investigate and report more as more stories come out. But in the meantime, this is a super, super awesome interview. Like I said, I think it's one of the best shows we've done. And it's with Director of Planning for Fort Worth Southside Inc., Mike Brennan. He leads the development initiatives for Fort Worth Southside Inc. and near Southside. And he's just super thoughtful, a true Fort Worthian. And he just has that Panther City swag where he's just really calm and collective, but he's so thoughtful and smart and strategic. And so it was a true honor, and I'm telling you, I learned a ton, Jimmy as well. And I just jumped on here to acknowledge Mike and the incident on Thursday. So thank you for listening, and let's get to the interview.
I grew up in Fort Worth. I moved here when I was 4 years old. My parents moved me here. I was actually born in Hawaii, and my dad was in the service. He was doing residencies after medical school, ended up in Fort Worth. And so I landed here when I was 4, and my formative years, teenage years, I was here in Fort Worth. I actually left for the last 2 years of high school and went off to school in New Jersey. And that sort of set off this multi-city trek where I spent time in New Jersey, in Nashville, in Charlotte, in Cambridge, and Boston, and then came back to Fort Worth. So while I was gone, at that time, I was thinking that I'm probably gone forever. I was thinking that greener pastures elsewhere, and didn't necessarily think of Fort Worth as being my ultimate landing spot. But while I was away, particularly when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina after college, that's when I really sort of caught the bug of studying cities and choosing that career path of going into urban planning, and decided to go back to graduate school and study urban planning. And that's what I was doing when I was up in Cambridge and Boston. And spring of my final year in graduate school, when it was time to look for a job, still wasn't necessarily thinking of Fort Worth, at least at the top of mind. I had spent time sort of jumping back to the city for breaks and, of course, to spend time with my parents. And it was interesting. On one of those breaks, I think it was Christmas before or during my final year, I came back, and my dad at that point had his practice on Magnolia right across from where Upper 90 and was Tina's Cocina, now Taqueria San Andres. So right across there is a red brick building, Dialysis Associates. That was his spot. And he said, you need to meet with this guy, Don Scott. They've just started this new nonprofit that's been formed to help bring the near South Side, the then most commonly known as the medical district, trying to bring it back. And so I met with Don Scott, and in the office where I now spend every day. Well, during normal times, I spend every day. These days, maybe a few days a week. So it turned out that went back to school and was looking for a job, and there was an opening posted on the website of the American Planning Association, entry-level planner position in the city's planning department in the urban design division. So long story short, I applied got that job, landed back in Fort Worth in July of 1999, spent 6 years working for the city, and jumped over to what was then Fort Worth South Inc., now near Southside Inc. So sort of the boomerang story. Went out, learned some things, and came back.
Yeah. And what is, can you kind of give, what does your role look like as leading near Southside? And how does, all that experience, you've been in a lot of really cool places. And you're bringing that back to Fort Worth. And so how are you thinking about near Southside on the regular, like day to day? And what do you see its long-term impact is to where Fort Worth is going?
I think that our district is now positioned as one of the primary essential economic engines for the city. And it's always been that way to some extent because it's always been home to the city's medical district. Mm-hmm. And along with that, home to some major industrial anchors like Justin Boots and Dickies and Dannon, Vandervoort's Dairy. So even in those decades where there was a lot of disinvestment, there were businesses moving out, residents moving out, it still was a core part of the city's economy. Now, today, flash forward to today, those assets, that sector, the healthcare sector predominantly, has been strengthened and is now at a whole nother level. We've also added a sixth anchor with UT Southwestern having a major presence here. But in addition to that, it is now home to a large share of Fort Worth's creative sector. It has become a destination for visitors. There's a whole economy related to that. Just the fact that the eclectic mix of restaurants and pubs and music venues and all the attractions that we now have, those are now positioning the near South Side economically in a way where it's, with downtown and Alliance and the Stockyards always has its unique spot. But, I'm fortunate to be working in a district that has had this really interesting trajectory over the years, sort of heyday, and then a long time of downward trend. And now sort of bouncing back in a way that I think is redefining the area. And to your question of sort of what is our day to day, our organization, near Southside Inc., we've got a full-time staff of 5 great workers that are dedicated to working on behalf of all the stakeholders of the district to push it forward. And we get to do that in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure we'll dive into some of that.
Yeah.
I think one, like talking about the stakeholders of the district, like just driving around there, even in the past couple months, the number of new apartment complexes and places for people to live in the near South Side is just exploding. How do you look out or get to know who those stakeholders are now as residents in the area, or who are you trying to attract there? What does that piece of it look like? Because I feel like it's the stakeholders are definitely growing from mostly business based to now a lot more residential and apartment people behind that also.
Yeah, absolutely. Jimmy, I don't know if you have a number in your head, just looking at the number of apartment developments that you've seen pop up. But if you put all of those together, the ones that are recently completed and the ones that are sort of in the pipeline, might be under construction, we're going to end up with 5,000 new residents, in a year from now, when let's say when 415 Hemp Hill is finished and leased up, or at least leasing out, I think we'll probably have 5,000 new residents, going back to the completion of, say, South 400, which is the apartment project immediately to its east. So you're right. That is a whole new set of stakeholders, obviously residents. Some of them, we know that a good percentage of them have been stakeholders before because they're working in the hospitals or working within the district. And so as far as the engagement, that's the fun part of our job is, in non-pandemic times, we're hosting regular monthly breakfast networking events where, we sort of invite all of our membership, which are generally businesses that are located in the district, but also the management from these apartment complexes. And oftentimes those breakfasts are hosted by newly arrived businesses or residential projects. And so they get to know us and get to know each other through those events. And then we're producing in normal years, and maybe we'll get lucky and things will come together so we can do it this fall. We're producing Arts Goggle and Fridays on the Green and Open Streets.
Love me some Arts Goggle.
And that's the way where everybody gets to come together and have some fun.
Yeah. So some things, like, I think what to look here is I'm interested to know where the occupancy is right now on all these buildings. Cause to me, it feels like overwhelming, right? Me and Jimmy just said Fort Worth is like the 14-year-old teenager who has a size 15 shoe, but he's still like 5'9". He hasn't grown into his body yet. So I feel like all the apartments are basically that right now. So, I mean, looking at, Luke Ranker from Star Telegram, he recently did a page about the apartments conversation in Fort Worth, and 23,000 new residents came to Fort Worth from 23 to 34 years of age, and seems like the right kind of number for these 5,000 apartments. But then I also know a lot of these apartments are ran by people who are not from Fort Worth, and this is kind of like what they do is they find next big cities and pits their apartments. Rose and Ramble or Rumble. I know that one's from Chicago.
Ramble and Rose.
Ramble and Rose. I think they're from Chicago.
That one's homegrown. 415 Hemp Hill is a Chicago group.
Oh, gotcha. That's right. Okay. So I guess what is I guess that stuff. Like, can you give us, like, how does that look on bringing in outside development as well as homegrown investors, and then also just like that boom with the apartment complex today's and their capacity?
This is, anybody that drives down the street and sees all of these apartments being built, that's the first question they have. All right, who is going to fill up these apartments? And that's been a question for us too. So we're regularly in contact with the developers. We're working with the developers through the planning and construction of these. They've got to go through the design review process with the near Southside code and all of that. So we've got a good handle on number of units and sort of what the mix of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms and what their target is for the folks that they're trying to get to live there. But then once they start leasing up, we're very curious as to, all right, how are these filling up? So what we've heard at the macro level, all of the industry research indicates that American households have changed dramatically from the nuclear model that was, back in the 60s and 70s. So the size of households has changed. The date at which people are getting married has shifted much later. The prospects for home ownership has shifted later in life. So there's this extended time period where, more folks might be paying off student loans, might need more time to save up for a down payment for the house. And at the same time, we've got the largest elderly the silver boom from the baby boomers. They're also a market for many of these urban housing projects. So all of the data in our district indicates that these apartments are filling up really ahead of schedule when you talk to the developers. So the Cooper, we were just on the phone with the developer of the Cooper. That is the largest one by far, 390 units. You've seen it on Rosedale, 2 full blocks, almost 2 full blocks. And I think that she said that they are already at 25%. And that hasn't been, I think that they're just now finishing that western portion.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're optimistic that those are not going to be, projects that sit largely vacant. Personally, I like the pressure that having that number of units hit our supply places on rents. Because if there's pressure for these developers to get people to lease apartments, they're going to be providing specials. They're going to be putting some downward pressure on their rents, and that's going to make those units more affordable to a larger cross section, in addition to the income restricted units that are being delivered through the mixed income workforce housing projects that we also see.
Yeah. Because I even think now this is the hype man version of me to you, Mike, in the sense of y'all's responsibility to Fort Worth is, you guys are our South Congress. You guys, I mean, Alliance, all that's cool. But what we're talking about, the future of Fort Worth, you guys really hold what happens, and what's going to bring tech talent, if they want to, especially as knowledge-based workers can work from home now. How do we make Fort Worth that home where they want to do it here because what they feel when they go down near Southside? And to me, I'm being honest, I'm a testimony of it. I'm not from Fort Worth. I went to Arts Goggle with my wife. I remember an older lady saying, this reminds me of Austin in the 90s. And entrepreneurial EJ gets excited and says, well, hey, Mon, I think we should move to Fort Worth and actually do so. So we lived on West Magnolia for 2 years when she graduated from dental school from San Antonio. However, then the next step was for me is, man, we need a second room because this one room is too small. But it's 1650, 17 was next. And so we went to East Side to, hang out with Jimmy over here and ended up buying a house. And so I think the rate thing is going to be interesting. We're $200,000 in college loan debt from dental school. These are really things. And so how do you just see it playing out? That responsibility you guys hold. I know you're 5 people strong, but this is you are a very magical exponential boom formula to it all I'm excited to hear what you're thinking.
Well, it's, your story, that is, first of all, we love hearing those stories because, up until 5, maybe 10 years ago, all of this was sort of abstract. It was, all right, let's focus on creating a great place where people are going to want to live and people are going to want to work, and we'll attract creative businesses and developers wanting to build a mix of housing, and we'll have this community that is very unique in Fort Worth that will attract young talent. And we're seeing that play out. Your story is a perfect example of that. I think that, when we look at the boundary of what we formally call the near South Side, it is, our organization's boundary and the boundary of the tax increment finance district that we administer on behalf of the city. It's largely the area, our southern boundary is Allen. That's the southern boundary of JPS Medical Center, and it cuts through Fairmount. Now, the northern half of Fairmount that includes, our form-based development code doesn't apply there. The TIF doesn't apply there, but we work in partnership with them just to make sure that Fairmount benefits from all of this work. But really, if you think of kind of Magnolia and north to to Vickery to I-30, and then east, we go east of 35 a couple blocks and have some overlap with Southeast Fort Worth Inc., historic Southside neighborhood. And then on the west side, the Fort Worth and Western Railroad. That area historically has not been, kind of single family neighborhood. It's not been the Fairmount, Ryan Place, Oakhurst, Arlington Heights type of first ring suburb. It's been largely a mix of uses, institutional uses, the hospitals we talked about, the large businesses, and there's been a mix of housing throughout. So if you think about that area that we call the Ludame St. Louis historic neighborhood over by Rar and Sons Brewery. So really cool, just this pocket of historic charm over there. Cannon Chinese restaurant smack in the middle of it. We built a park right there. You've got older apartment buildings. You have some really nice homes that over time have been converted to their Center for the Healing Arts is there, Three Danes Inn, the bed and breakfast. That's the kind of residential fabric that was there. And so what we hope is that our district is largely going to be urban housing options. We're not going to have a lot of options where you have, any sizable outdoor exclusively private space. It's not going to be a have your own yards type of environment. But that's typical of, all kind of central city, urban areas like that. But we hope that the neighborhoods that are immediately adjacent, historic Southside, Fairmount, South Hemphill Heights, Mistletoe and Berkeley to the west, that those neighborhoods will provide options for anybody, any household type, size, socioeconomic status, that there will be options for anybody to find housing there. I will say that it's going to take some zoning reform in those areas to allow for more use of accessory dwelling units, kind of the garage apartment or the granny flat or those sorts of things, so that you can have some multi-generational housing and you can have opportunities for, young professionals that might be paying off a lot of debt, might not be able to afford the big house or the yard, but still want that environment. So it's kind of a lot of things that we have to address, not just within our boundary.
Well, and I feel like future looking also, like public transportation has to play a big role in that. Like obviously South Main and Magnolia are still 2-lane roads that are managed for the most part by stop signs. 5,000 more people moving into that area, like having a public transportation system that builds up around that, I'm sure is something that y'all are focused on moving forward as well.
Absolutely. Yes. I had the opportunity to serve on the board of directors for what was the T, now rebranded as Trinity Metro, back in, I think, 2011 to 2013. And that is where I sort of saw up front the challenges that Fort Worth faces in reaching world-class transit system status. And I'm sure y'all are familiar with the funding discrepancy between our allocation of sales taxes toward transit in Fort Worth compared to Dallas, which we do a half cent of our sales tax and they do a full cent. And so taking that funding constraint into account, we still are hopeful, and we're strong partners with Trinity Metro today to try to increase awareness of the transit system that we have. So I made the choice, this is flashing back to pre-pandemic normal times, when my daughter turned 16, and ironically, she needed to be able to get to where she needed to go more than I did, because I live less than a mile from my office and I work in a district that it is served well by our transit system. There's not a big area of Fort Worth where you can really live without a car, but within the near South Side, you really can. And it's a combination of transit plus the occasional Uber ride. And in my case, I like riding bikes. So, it makes it really easy. So I decided, let's not get a third car. I'll go car free. And it works well for me. And I think that it would work well for more people if we collectively sort of make this mental shift to viewing the bus system and pushing Trinity Metro to provide a system that, and pushing our city council too, that has a higher frequency of service and that has extended hours. And within the near South Side, if you're anywhere close to Hemp Hill, you've got every 15 minutes today is a bus that's taking you north to downtown, south to LeGrand Plaza. And there's a lot of stuff that you can reach within that. And then we've got lines that are on 8th Avenue and Magnolia from Rosedale. So looking long-term, I love rail transit. I love the opportunity the opportunities that are spelled out in the vision plans from Trinity Metro and the city. But I think short-term, we can do a lot with what we have to increase those transit options. Because you're right, Jimmy, all those 5,000 people hopping in their car to go to their favorite restaurant in Magnolia, that doesn't work. Hopefully they will see that it works a lot better, and you can, catch up on email if you're riding in the bus and, sit back and relax.
I know when we first kind of connected from Cameron with Fort Worth Innovate, we talked about how important creatives and artists play into this. And I know you're doing some pretty cool stuff around that. I would love you to talk about it and what's the update on it and where you thinking creatives play in this space.
So I reached out to EJ after I heard the podcast interview with Cameron on his Innovate Fort Worth podcast. And first of all, your story was great, and just have that entrepreneurial story and somebody landing in Fort Worth and being attracted to it for the reasons that you said. And I also, through reading the article in Fort Worth Weekly, I saw that you yourself were a musician. And so I reached out, and because we were in the middle or just starting this discussion of what we call the Near South Side Creative Incubator Project, which is not yet a project. It is a project that has a lot of potential, and we're studying where it could go, what exactly it could be, and most importantly, how could we put the pieces together to make it happen.
Sorry if I said something too early. Sorry if I said something too early. I'd be happy to.
No, this is good. This is good because we want to spread the word, because one of those first steps was, let's reach out to creatives in Fort Worth, artists, musicians, art champions, we would call them, that might not necessarily be producing art or music themselves, but are the heads of art organizations or supporters. And of course, city officials, leaders from local foundations that might be able to put this together. What a creative incubator, as we envision it, is a development that includes housing that targets artists and other creatives. It includes spaces for one or more art anchor organizations. It includes some working studio space, and it could also include some spaces for early stage creative companies that, might be focusing on virtual reality with a tech angle, but still well rooted in the arts, and some shared spaces out. It'd be great to have an outdoor area that's flexible to host events and sort of cross pollination of programs and so forth, and is a social space. So we're studying Southside Preservation Hall is a great building located in Fairmount. Half of it has been sort of mothballed for 25 years. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at the rec building, and specifically the site next to the rec building. Rec building is the old Fort Worth Recreation Building on Vickery. That's right across from the parking lot where you park if you're taking the train station or taking the train to the airport or to Dallas. And then a third site also in South Main Village, kind of over near the old Fire Station 5, Black Eyed Distilling, Panther City Barbecue, that area. And all of this effort is sort of a tangible real estate project that's an outgrowth of our larger near Southside arts effort. So last year, during the pandemic, one of our biggest challenges or the biggest initiatives was to apply for designation by the Texas Commission on the Arts to designate the near South Side as a cultural district. So the Fort Worth currently has one designated cultural district, the museum district, but this program, state program, designates these districts all over the state, and it makes it formally recognizes these areas as having these cultural attributes and economic engines that are a result of that. And it also makes you eligible for some grant funding. So we applied, we got the designation. NearSouthsideArts.org, for anybody that's interested, will give you all of the materials that we submitted for that application. And basically what you'll see, there's a map. If you go to NearSouthsideArts.org, there's a map that has a pin for all of the different assets that are somehow related to that broader Near Southside Arts initiative. All the film and video production studios, the recording studios, the venues for live performances, the creative marketing firms, the coffee shops and the restaurants where all these creative folks spend their time. And that is how, that's the culmination of years and hundreds of partners working together to locate their businesses here, to start theaters, to record, platinum selling records like Leon did in the old golf building in South Main Village. And all of those efforts coming together to now formally recognize this. So that's a big focus of our organization. We have two nonprofits. One's a 501c4, Near Southside Inc. The other is a 501c3, now under the name of Near Southside Arts. And that's how all of our community events and these other initiatives related to the arts fall under that 501c3.
Yeah, you would like a conversation. So the reason I knew that there was a Chicago-based apartment complex is because my friend has the contract for their marketing, and he was in town to learn about Fort Worth. And I was living in West Magnolia area in an apartment there when he came, and the first thing he said to me was, "Where's Nile City Sound? Where's it at? Where's it at?"
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah.
and I'm like, I mean, you really it's just this thing that's right there. That's it. But that's to me shows one, he's a very techie, very strong example of a high tech knowledge based worker who has probably 30, 40. And I mean, he's deep. I mean, he's a very successful guy. And it would be great. And him and his wife danced to Leon Bridges, which, is now, I feel like everyone does. But what I'm saying is really big fan of that work. And I think it's just hearing you talk, it makes me think of how real creatives like this guy is seeking what you guys are curating. I think that's well, cool. And
just the fact that, stories like that tell you that the collective we, all of Fort Worth, we're reaching people in ways that we don't really recognize every day.
Yeah.
That these stories that, we know the ins and outs of the Leon's story, and it's incredible. And he's just an incredible guy. And we know that he started playing on the corner when we had the Southside Urban Market at Daggett in South Main. And that evolved to him really in a makeshift studio space before Nile City Sound had their formal studio, recording that record, we all know how it blew up, and next thing you know, he's Saturday Night Live playing at the White House and makes a second record that takes it to a whole nother level. Well, we get sort of insulated to that. Like, yeah, we all know that. Well, we don't know sort of the dominoes that stories like that knock down. And it gives people an impression of Fort Worth that's totally different than the Fort Worth that we've sort of been living within, particularly those of us who have been here for a while. You know, I think that Visit Fort Worth, and I don't know if y'all saw the event that they had, and Opal Lee getting recognized, and her speech was just incredible. But there's a whole different Fort Worth that's being presented to the rest of the country and the world, both formally through like Visit Fort Worth's efforts and informally through these conversations like with EJ's friends. It's really cool.
Yeah, I feel like another example of that is Backlot Studio and Red Productions. And most people probably don't know or don't see the behind the scenes of what goes into making a movie. But when something like Miss Juneteenth is choosing to shoot in Fort Worth, we housed a couple of the production people in our guest rooms. But they spend, all their time working in the shared space on South Main. And then they see, like, would I rather, go back to my apartment in whatever city, or is Fort Worth a viable place for me to come and be a full-time production person? And I feel like even just Creativity Loves Company, being the mural on the side of their building, like, obviously speaks to them being a workspace for creatives, but helps give part of a vision for the whole area of right when you drive in, you see Creativity Loves Company, like that's the vision for this whole area.
Exactly. And that visible, like we were saying before, a lot of those stories have kind of been tucked away, but the more that we are visibly transforming our buildings, and with art being a key attribute, in the same way that we've got great historic buildings, but if we have murals that are telling the story, like the Creativity Loves Company, like the new murals that Jay Wilkinson is commissioning with the partnering artists across the district, that's a huge part of the appeal. That goes back to we've always had a strong focus on the importance of place, and the sense of place that our district has as being an anchor for talent, for investment, for just improving the quality of life here. And the Ms. Juneteenth story, I think, is one that's just going to continue to grow. On that note, I think that the award shows are probably going to elevate that film, which is incredible, to a whole nother level. And all of a sudden, Fort Worth will be getting more attention in the film world, and that will be for feature films and for the commercials and all the other stuff that we're starting to see happen.
Yeah. So I think we're all go right. One question I have is around, right. As Fort Worth, like a lot of the conversations we've had with other candidates, other interviews with like Ann Zeta or Cameron or Robert Stearns, is a lot of the future of Fort Worth, and how do we, I think we're obviously doing a phenomenal job with the creative side of our talent. But I think, like you said, this tech entrepreneurial scene, and even just like I think of like Carly with Tribe Alive, like even just her hustle, like she could be in LA, she could be wherever she wants, and she's still here. What are you hearing, and what are you guys trying to do to get startup companies or more entrepreneurial activity to then support the creatives? Any conversations? I know you had meetings with Cameron, I know, and stuff like that recently too. So
yeah. And so you've been able to I don't know, have you talked to Hayden Blackburn yet?
I have not.
Hayden is with Tech Fort Worth. So, Cameron has his share of the ecosystem, and he's one of the big drivers. I think formally in his title, it probably refers to ecosystem builder. So that's through his efforts, sponsored by HSC, Health Science Center, combined with Robert's efforts at Economic Development City, Hayden's efforts through Tech Fort Worth, and then partners like us, where we're playing a role that should be complementary to everybody, all the other roles. And the most formal or intentional initiative that's currently underway and still in its infancy is a initiative that was first identified in the city's economic development strategic plan. And in the plan, I think one of the primary recommendations is create a near Southside medical innovation district. So that came out early 2018. We spent 2018 and 2019 taking that sort of nebulous, but important, at least as far as the level of significance it was given in the plan initiative, from words on the page to, okay, how do we do that? Who do we involve? What is the outcome? What are our goals? So, for a year, we hired a team from UTA to conduct research and produce a report of recommendations. We convened meetings that included the CEOs of hospitals and entrepreneurs that had come out of Tech Fort Worth, that full spectrum of stakeholders that might be interested or contribute to this idea of a innovation district. And at the end of it, we had a name, Iterate Health Innovation Community. So Iterate, ITER, numeral 8. And so we got the brand, which is always very important. We had some launch teams. So I'm leading a launch team focused on places and spaces. Hayden's leading a launch team focused on biotech, medical research. And there's a governance launch team, there's a marketing launch team, and so forth. So pandemic hits, those healthcare worker, the focus of the anchor healthcare institutions turns immediately to addressing COVID, and the ability to get everybody together frequently, that has sort of been put on pause. Meanwhile, I've been working with Hayden and with Robert and a team from ULI, the Urban Land Institute, to study the possibility of what we're calling the Iterate Innovation Hub. So think of that sort of places and spaces category of work. We need the spaces where early stage companies can do their thing. And if it's biotech, a lot of times they need laboratory space to do that. We need the places that are magnets for talent and those places where people get together. Well, this Iterate Innovation Hub idea is for a project to provide those wet lab spaces, those shared conference facilities that currently we don't have enough of in Fort Worth, and ideally for it to be anchored by a corporate anchor that is interested in having their operations adjacent to this space where early stage companies will be hopefully accelerating to their next stage and then moving on and fills up with the next company.
So are you?
That's on the healthcare sector side.
Are you recruiting? Are you recruiting outside corporation to show them this kind of asset that they could have if they came across the street, or are you shopping around locally mainly for that? We are. All right. So our role is to study it from a real estate development side. Mm-hmm. So we've identified a company reached out to us that said, wow, hey, we would be interested in being an anchor for this type of organization. And then I'm teaming up with ULI to figure out, all right, where could it go? How big does it need to be? How do we put the funding together to do it? And then Hayden's world over at Tech Fort Worth, that's his world of recruiting companies, helping them
from that early business plan stage to attract investors, to test their whatever product it is. And once they're up and running, there's that phase in their development where they need access to laboratory space. They can't afford to pay a whole lot of money because they're not making a lot of money yet. And so there's some great stories of companies that have spun out of Tech Fort Worth that if we can provide the spaces that they need along their trajectory, then they'll stay in Fort Worth, and they'll be those success stories that we're hearing so much about these days.
Yeah, I think there's I think a lot of the issues that happens with like bio or medical tech, you get tons of debt and you build like IP, intellectual property, and then you get acquired for that. And so your company kind of doesn't actually formulate. And you know, I think the work that you all are doing, we're just really kind of hoping for that almost rack space moment for us in a way where eventually the hometown kid or person can now build that tech hub, you know, where San Antonio did with rack space. I don't know. I think that's that. I mean, yeah, I love the combustion there. That seems like an awesome iterate. I love the name too. So looks cool. I feel like you're dropping a lot of knowledge on this interview. I feel like I'm like, how do I not know any of this? Like, this is a good interview. You got anything?
So like, I feel like we've talked a lot about where South Main is now, or the Southside is now.
Because I do have another question. If you're going to wrap it up,
no.
Okay.
What are like the 5-year goals of Near Southside Inc.? What do you guys have on the whiteboard of like, this is the high level vision we're shooting for, and these are the high level like bullet points that we want to hit as a community?
It's a great question, and it's definitely top of mind these days. I mentioned the TIF district, so the tax increment finance district. And just to, keep it simple, what that does is it reserves a share of the property taxes that are generated within that boundary I described earlier. It sets them aside in a separate account, and those dollars can only be spent within the boundary on public infrastructure. So the total transformation of our street network that you've seen, whether it's the reconstruction of South Main Street, just kind of the nuts and bolts work of resurfacing streets in South Main Village, all of those projects have been funded either entirely or partially by that TIF account. We administer that as an organization. We administer that on behalf of the city of Fort Worth, and specifically Robert Stern's department. There are a whole bunch of other TIFs throughout the city. The city administers most of them internally. They outsource that work to us. They outsource the downtown TIF to Downtown Fort Worth Inc. So as a result of that work, we receive some funding for our administrative work from the TIF. Well, the TIF stops the money at the end of 2022. And so we now have a public-private partnership that supports our efforts, which we demonstrate to the city that we are an extension of their economic development, the development services, parks and rec, neighborhood services, all these departments. We're doing work that advances their missions. So I'm making the case now that, considering where the Near South Side is today as this essential economic engine, like we've talked about, that it makes a lot of sense for us to continue this partnership between the city of Fort Worth, Near South Side Inc. And that looking forward, there's a lot of work that's still left. It's interesting how I get to see the perceptions that people have of the district. That, a lot of people, everybody has their own experience with our district. They might be working here, they might be going to the doctor here, they might be spending time at their favorite restaurants on Magnolia or now South Main Street. Everybody's got their sort of Near South Side experience. Well, a lot of times the limits that those people have on their experiences, they might think that, well, Magnolia's done, it's fully built out. It's everything has happened there that's ever going to happen, or they might even think that about South Main Street. I think that's much more of a stretch to be thinking that of South Main Street. Yeah. Even though there's so much that is already going on. But if you look outside of those areas, there's a lot of vacant property.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity, particularly as you go east. Like I was saying before, we have that overlap boundary east of 35 a bit. There's a lot of work left to be done. And that Near Southside Arts initiative, that is just now really at the formative stage where we haven't yet secured grant funding to help our arts organizations reach the next level, to allow us to produce maybe some more community events that attract thousands of people to the district. Iterate right now is all potential. It's, we can tell great stories about how successful the hospitals are at expanding and providing care. And we have some great stories coming out of Tech Fort Worth, but really Iterate is the future. What can Fort Worth be on that side? So that's what we're working toward. And we're, still sort of have those buckets of work of helping to shape development, projects that come in, producing community events and our Art South program, public art programs to change, to really foster that creative community and cultural cohesion. And so there's plenty left to do. We just, all of that is, contingent on us, at least if we want to stay at the same level of resources that we have now, of us, finding that right mix of public and private support.
Yeah. So, two quick answer questions. And then the one I wanted to go to, the first one is, what is your favorite city outside of Fort Worth? And I guess why?
My favorite city outside of Fort Worth, because of the time that I spent in Cambridge and Boston, I have such attachment to that city. That was where I went to school, and that was the laboratory for what I was living and studying. So that's up there. I also have an attachment to Charleston, South Carolina. That's where my father's from, and we went there growing up every year. One of a close family friend led that city for 40 years, and it's been remarkable to follow that. In Texas, I'm a big fan of Austin. I've seen that trajectory that EJ was describing, and my best friend is in Austin, and he's from Fort Worth. We lost him, unfortunately, to Austin, but he's doing great things. And I get to hear their complaints about the Austin of old versus the Austin of now. Yeah. I still love the Austin of now. And what is your
take on the California exodus? Right. And this is something I was ranting to Cameron about, was how Miami kind of jumped in out of nowhere in the last couple months as there's this new innovation hub, and and then you have Austin. How do you feel how can Fort Worth get involved with that? And almost, even if we're just taking scraps, whoever doesn't want to be in Austin, if any company still wants to live in Texas, but you're getting, inflated in Austin, what's your thoughts of how does Fort Worth leverage what's going on in Austin? Because it seems like San Antonio's doing a good job of it.
Yeah. And I think the same strategies that are underway in San Antonio, and I think that are already underway here, are going to help us with that. It's creating the places where people want to be, and that create a buzz, whether it's near Southside or downtown or Stockyards or 6 Points Village, Race Street. I think that's got to be a continued focus, is just fostering that same mix of ingredients. And then I think that on the business and investment side, really having those players, whether it's people in City Hall or local investors that may historically have been focused on, the the energy sector. Maybe it's, sort of oil and gas focus, but, with our economy now, it makes sense to focus on a broader range of sectors. I think that that's the other piece, because all of those money people, they have those networks that are all over the country, all over the world. And if they can be telling the story of there's a great workforce here, there are, talented, educated people that can be founders of new companies. If all of those things can come together and the word can spread, then people that today do not know about Fort Worth or don't know enough will be on their radar.
Yeah. What is, like, if you look at, I know there has to be a lot of politics involved in the sense of not even like government politics, more just like real estate ownership and dollars and who's giving. What do you feel is like the Achilles heel, or like the sensitive thing we have to be very careful taking it along to success where we want to be? Like, what are the vulnerabilities in Fort Worth and this succeeding that you're constantly thinking about making sure that we handle accordingly?
That's a great question. I think that, there's, all of our cities are continually evolving and growing, and nothing's going to stay the same. So we need to defend against things that are going to negatively impact the competitive advantages that we currently have. So I think that it would be a shame if, for example, in South Main Village, development pressures and property values continued to go up at a rate where it made sense for people to start tearing down old buildings and constructing new buildings in their place. There is plenty of opportunity. We know, because we see projects like Broadstone Southside going up one block west of South Main. We know there are opportunities for those larger infill projects. And that's great that we can have a mix. But if we were to lose the character of those older buildings on South Main Street, South Main Village is a totally different place.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a common. So then you take that goal of, hey, let's keep the old buildings and the character that they contribute. How do we do that? That's a conversation that I'm having with the owners of those buildings to see if we can secure historic designation for some of those that are currently not designated, because that's the protection. It's the reason that Fairmount is the incredible neighborhood that it is. You can't tear down those houses. And so that's a vulnerability that is just a result of development pressure. Right now, I think we're in an okay spot because those buildings are actually delivering a ton of value.
Yeah.
Because they're reaching or attracting tenants that are paying good rents and the owners are making money. We're very fortunate that those buildings ended up in the hands of sensitive, largely locally based owners.
Yeah. Well, I guess like my last question, and one, appreciate it, Mike, for being on, and
thank you guys.
Love to continue
Glad to be here.
Yeah, love to continue to connect, and how any way we could just as creatives in your world, let us know how we could be helpful. My last kind of question is it's going back to an experience I had living on West Magnolia. Is my job takes me to have to wear a lot of suits and stuff. And there's Evans Cleaners under the bridge, right there across of the MEL ARC offices.
Yep.
Black owned laundry place where you get your dry cleaning done. It was passed down. You could tell the young guys aren't business savvy. It was passed down. And I mean, they were so in business savvy, like they got their pit bull inside. Like it's like, but I'm not worried about it. I'm going to ride or die and keep bringing my clothes here because you're literally under the bridge. And, I'm not a person of money, but I always thought, like, if I was a person of money, I would love to collaborate with these people to legitimize this, because people want to support Black owned businesses. That's a true thing, that there's real ROI there. But they just miss some legitimate, they just miss someone to see them, invest in them. And like everyone from Fairmount will go get their laundry here. And this would be a booming dry cleaning place. And we just can fix this up. They're no longer, I believe they're no longer in business. At least from my experience of trying to get my dry cleaning done. I also, you know, and I imagine you get hit pretty big when everyone's now stuck at home.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing to help and think about the talent of people like the Evans, you know, and the importance of those businesses to the growth as the next place is historic Southside, and even, you know, Hattie, and even going all the way to our side, east side, you know, the West Meadowbrook.
Yeah.
How do you see all that plays out? As that's a big part of the, I guess, circle.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to your previous question of what are the vulnerabilities. I think the vulnerability there is that those areas redevelop without the right initiatives put in place to advance those Black-owned businesses and the culture of, you know, places like Evans and Rosedale, where, you know, that has, you know, for Fort Worth, that area is the same as the areas that we hear about, read about in other cities that were the hub of, you know, whether it's Black main streets that you talk about, that was the cultural hub that produced jazz musicians, you know, world famous jazz musicians, educators that changed the public education system in Fort Worth. These just cultural anchors that you read about. And today there's not much of the business side of that left. So we, you know, in Evans and Rosedale, historic Southside area, we sort of put on a different hat to assist the neighborhood association, Southeast Fort Worth Inc., specific businesses, and city's economic development department, who's in negotiations with a development group for a big project over there, with the core commitment that we need to respond to neighborhood input, set things in motion, if there are new development projects that have spaces that are affordable to, and hopefully targeting homegrown businesses that come out of that neighborhood, and then supportive of efforts that, you know, like Smokeaholics going into the building that it went into. There was the owner of that building he's closely involved with our organization, and, you know, he had the same mindset of, all right, I'm going to be diligent about who I might lease this building to, because it was the same building where Cakes by Delisa was originally there. This is a legendary business that came out of the neighborhood there. And then it was a bakery, or an outpost of a bakery for Stir Crazy Baked Goods located on Magnolia. And when it was available again, he made sure that the tenant that landed there was from the neighborhood and was going to you know, be a new anchor. So there are a lot of pieces that have to come together. I'm confident that, particularly after the discussions that we had as a nation last year, and the commitment to support Black-owned businesses across the city, you know, I think that there's general consensus that, all right, this is the direction we all need to be rowing in, and certainly our organization is right in line with that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and jamming out with us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for this time. I feel like I learned a lot about what's going on, even as somebody who feels like they're pretty plugged in, being friends with a lot of the business owners in there, like knowing a lot of behind the scenes things. I feel like I still learned a lot from what's coming in the coming years for the near South Side.
Yeah, same. Mike, we appreciate your time, and well, we're really looking forward to seeing it grow over the years. And great job up to this point with the team and the partners, and all the work that's already been done.
Thanks so much, you guys. This has been a blast. Thanks for having me, and kudos to both of you for bringing something to Fort Worth that is, you're adding a voice, a perspective it's fresh, it is timely, and you're making a difference just by talking about the things that you're talking about, and a pretty cool Fort Worth future that we're all excited about.